3.3 major project 4, staying focused, reflective feedback. The project overall went quite well. I did some in-depth research into armour, because originally, earlier on in some of my projects, I've been using the ideas of armour, so it was a good idea to do in-depth research using the armour that I'd been to view a few years ago at the Wallace collection. So imagery of this chainmail, armour shoulders and armour torsos have been a good way to find out a little bit more about body shape, ideally for using for performance pieces. This has also kind of made connections with the Bauhaus Ballet. Their shapes have been interesting, almost me starting to think about that the shapes that they incorporate into the ballet could be armour pieces. This has then led into more in-depth research into designers using armour for their performances on the catwalk with Jean-Paul Gaultier, John Galliano and Alexander McQueen. But also as well, it gave me an insight with some of the making of my pieces, and started to look at video footage and research the fashion house atelier, where luxury products are made, designed, luxury materials, various forms of construction. And even though it possibly is criticised within practices of fashion, possible criticism from textile practitioners, I do actually see that there is a big impact of learning new knowledge of how these ateliers operate, with the refinement, the making, the craft-based ideas, looking back in history, redeveloping new ideas, possible redevelopment of the fashion house from history, for example, shape, form, print. So all in all, the education side of that has really made me realise that once I have sat down and started to make my own design concepts with the tactile knitted pieces, still incorporating mixed media, I did go more large scale, and the pieces are or have become quite time consuming. And I think it's made me realise what warrants the cost of pieces from the atelier, the time it takes to make the pieces, construct, design, and a percentage of this which I can relate to by a lot of handwork, whether it be printing, whether it be hand stitched, possible hand knitting. And I think it's kind of made me realise that these one-off bespoke pieces do actually warrant the price. So there was lots of learning done with the research. What this enabled me to do was then go off, start to think about design concepts in my sketchbook. Everything in the sketchbook is nice and visual as always, and also it showed within the sketchbook the development of some of these ideas by continuing to draw. I particularly focused on chainmail because I'd already previous projects used an armoured shoulder and an armour sleeve, which is still forefront for bringing back into some of the design concepts. I've gone with some advice that was given to me at assessment to make a continuous or conscious effort to use creative yarn, and I did focus mainly on just lots of sample making to replicate chainmail with various types of yarn. It's going to be very difficult to use metallic type yarns because they are quite costly, and I don't have the budget for that for the large scale pieces that I wanted to construct. even though I am using a single bed knitting machine, I have been able to use this useful by thinking about ideas and developing and pushing my new knowledge with the knitting machine. And all in all, I was very pleased with the combination of the creative yarns. The colour palette was all grey, so I suppose I've gone back slightly to working with the monochrome idea, which has worked very well. Colour palettes, as of yet, haven't clicked. So proportion of the assignment worked well for me, and then what happened was elements of working with slightly mini projects, and then working as or with a design concept, and them just focusing more on knit, which I think for project 5 I really want to just focus on designing some knitted structures that can be worn, because I still use the body as a platform. I'm still using the ideas of performance, but I think rather than relying on mixed media, which sometimes just feels as though I'm just embellishing the knitted fabric, I actually want to just make more use of the knit so that they become three-dimensional, to change the silhouettes of the body, again with armoured shapes, and some good ideas are starting to flow through. So I've also considered that Project 4's sketchbook will not be separate for Project 5. Lots of learning was made, lots of development, and pretty positive. A lot of this development work has stemmed from previous projects within Major Project. I think the development has been slightly slower, but all in all, you can see all my ideas, my knowledge on dyslexia, my knowledge and research with the creative playground, colour and tactility is starting to filter through. Possibly not so much consciously, and I feel as though I don't always have to reflect, well, this is colour, this is tactility. It's just started to naturally make connections because the knowledge is already there. Sometimes I don't always sit down and draw out an idea. What I'm finding that works quite well at the moment is just working direct with the knitting machine, taking an idea from an image and developing that process. The process of the knitting has been quite therapeutic as well, quite technical, and like I've said, quite time consuming, but I think I am ready now to take these elements and just keep it more simple. The simple ideas seem to be working quite successful. Simple colour. Some of the knitted samples are just quite simple, but the development of the three-dimensional shape and form for the body is becoming quite successful. So I'm looking forward to Project 5. I will begin Project 5 by making 2 large samples that will be continued from Project 4, and then this will kickstart Project 5 for me.